So hi everyone, really happy to have you here for this session about ArcGIS maps for Power BI. My name is Łukasz Pawłowski.
I'm Scott Ball.
And so we're from Microsoft and ESRI, and we're really excited to be talking with you about all the new capabilities that are in ArcGIS maps for Power BI. Now where I'd like to actually start the presentation is on the digital transformation, right? So as most of you know, the world is kind of changing, and it's changing because data is everywhere. The pace at which data comes at us now is phenomenal. The quantity of data is insane. And the question is, how do people like yourselves, how do I as a business user, how do I make decisions on data? How do I understand it quickly? How can I make accurate inferences? How do I really get to the heart of what's happening with such amounts of data? And I think that very quickly, as we look at that data, we find out that a lot of that data has to do with the world around us. And making sense of the world around us is, generally speaking, sort of spatial analysis, right? We want to see things on maps. We want to understand them in the context. And what we've actually done with ArcGIS Maps for Power BI in collaboration with ESRI is actually start bringing the power of geospatial analysis into Power BI. And I think it's been a crazy journey as we've been on this wonderful ride of understanding how we can bring these geospatial analysis and make it accessible to normal business users. No longer rarefied in the expanse of really sophisticated GIS analysts. There's obviously a place for that, but really making it possible for anyone in this room to really extract all of the value from their spatial data. And so what I want to do is I want to hand it off to Scott to tell us all about ESRI and how the ArcGIS Maps helps people make business decisions.
Thank you, Łukasz. So as he mentioned, my name is Scott Ball. I work at ESRI. How many people in the room are familiar with ESRI currently? Wow, that's a lot of you. That's awesome. Let's flip it. How many aren't familiar with ESRI? Just a handful. That's great. That's awesome to see. So for those of you who aren't familiar with ESRI, as I would tell my mom or my aunts, we make maps. That's kind of the layperson explanation of ESRI. We make software that makes maps. But for this crowd, a lot of you probably already know, we do much more than just make maps. We also enable location intelligence. We allow you to use your transactional and business data to unlock the location components, because we know most of that business data has a location component, and we allow you to turn that into location intelligence to make better, smarter decisions. So talking a little bit about ESRI, we have been in the business for a long time. Over 40 years now, we've been doing GIS. If you're not familiar with GIS, it stands for Geographic Information Science. And to do GIS, you can also use a GIS, which is a Geographic Information System. So it means both things. And we are the global leader in both. And we've been doing it for a long time. We've established ourselves as a global leader by building ArcGIS. ArcGIS, it's a funny term. So it's GIS, which is the base level of Geographic Information Systems. And the way that you can understand things using a GIS are using points and arcs. Those are the fundamental building blocks. A point is a place on a map. An arc is a line. And so now you know what ArcGIS means, if that was going to be anybody's question towards the end of the session. So ArcGIS, it is a platform. It is, a part of that platform is our desktop GIS software, which is used by GIS experts across the globe in small organizations, large organizations, and federal customers. It's also a web mapping tool. We have ArcGIS Online, which allows you to do web GIS. We also have many applications that we've built both internally, and we have extensibility options, so developers can actually create apps using ArcGIS. So what we're going to be talking about today is ArcGIS Maps for Power BI, in which we've taken a lot of the power of ArcGIS, and we've boiled it down into this really easy-to-use tool that is baked into Power BI. And so just wanted to kind of give you the context of what ESRI is and what ArcGIS is, because you're probably going to be seeing these terms a lot. So why do we do this thing? We create GIS software because we believe the science of where can unlock data's full potential in every organization. We believe that if you're ignoring the spatial component of your data, you're really missing out. And we believe that we can help with that. And so if we have a few minutes, I would like to show a quick video talking about the science of where. I'm going to actually pop out and show this directly on YouTube, because I think it really helps underline who we are and what kind of things we do in the world. Can you guys hear? How about now? No? Is that helping? Okay. It was a valiant effort, but I think we're going to skip the video. This is basically just showing you that we have impact and we have reach all across the world. We work with students, we work with federal governments, we work with people all around the world to use your location data to do things better. And we think of this as the science of where. We think this is something that can help you do your jobs better. Okay. And so that's a little bit of an overview of who we are and what kind of things we do. And to talk a little bit more about what GIS is, as I mentioned, it's a science and it's a system, and it allows you to visualize your data. Okay. If you've never visualized your information, that's a key building block. That's a key step in understanding spatial data. Just getting it on the map will allow you to do some things that you weren't able to do before, start to see patterns. But once you've got it on the map, what can you do with it? We can help you analyze it, interpret it, in order to understand relationships, patterns, and trends. And those are the things that you really want to know in order to start making better decisions within your organization. It'll help you start building location intelligence about your data. And building location intelligence is valuable to everybody in every industry. It's important for a number of reasons. It's been known to be important in the GIS community for a long time. It's starting to be known throughout the rest of the business world as an important asset to have, as illustrated by a Gartner report in 2017. There are a couple things that they've said that I want to call out. GIS is important because properly analyzing location can provide insights that support and improve your decision-making within your organization, in all parts of your organization, from marketing to supply chain to your operations group. Digital organizations in the future, the ones that succeed are going to be the ones that pay attention to this information. People that aren't paying attention to location information are going to be left behind. And the way that more organizations are going to be able to use this location information is by using these new tools, things like ArcGIS Maps for Power BI, things that we're creating to help business users and people that aren't necessarily GIS experts, like Łukasz was mentioning earlier, get into there and actually start making these discoveries and insights themselves. So as more people come online and are able to make use of these things and improve their spatial literacy, you're going to start to get improving returns. So what we're here to talk about today, now that we're 10 minutes into it finally, let's talk about ArcGIS Maps for Power BI, now that we've kind of laid the groundwork. As of this week, if you aren't aware, we've been promoted out of preview and we're now in general availability. So that's a big step for us, and we're very happy about that. So Maps for Power BI is available to Power BI users in desktop. And so right now, desktop has been released, what, Sunday, I think it was?
That's right. It got released, I think, yesterday, the latest build came out.
Yep, and so we're definitely in that one. We'll be coming to service a little later this week, and it will also be available in the Power BI GovCloud.
That's right.
Yep. So enough of this setup stuff. Let's talk about what this thing actually is. So you'll notice on the left that I've circled the ESRI globe, and that's how you're going to get ArcGIS maps for Power BI onto your report. You click on that, just like any other visual, it's going to show up for you. Once you have that report on the map, you're going to have a number of field wells, and those field wells are off to the right. And so I'm going to take a minute and walk through what those field wells are, because this is going to be your primary way that you interact with maps for Power BI. So to begin, the location field well is probably the most important field well that you're going to want to pay attention to. It's where you can drag any of your fields with location data, whether it be a street address. We prefer the street addresses be fully concatenated with street, city, zip code, etc. If you just drag in 123 Main Street, it's probably not going to do a great job, so tend to maybe work with your data a little bit before you put it in there. But we can also handle things like state individually, or zip code, or any standard geography that you may want to use. You can drag into that location field well, and we're going to try to understand it. It's got some smarts in there, and it's going to try to figure out what you're trying to do. You can help it out by using the data modeling tools in Power BI. You can actually tell it what kind of location is in a particular field, and that will help our smarts make sense of the thing. But if we just can't figure it out, there are ways that I'm going to show you a little bit later that allow you to go in and tell us exactly what kind of location it is and where your data exists, and more than likely we'll be able to map it. So if you happen to have latitude and longitude information, those are the next two field wells, and that's the other way that you can bring data into maps for Power BI. And if you have that information, if you're familiar with latitude and longitude information, it's the way that probably if you have a GIS department, it's probably one of the ways that they will give you data. It will have lat and lon connected to it. And so that's really the coordinates for a location. And so whenever you drag a street address into location, you're going to basically send that street address to ESRI servers, and we're going to turn it into latitude and longitude and send it back. So if you've already got latitude and longitude, it's going to speed things up. So it's going to be much faster. We're not going to have to process it. And you're going to have higher data limits. So you're going to be able to add many more latitude and longitude points to your map than you are with the location field well. So that's something to be aware of. A lot of data online will have latitude and longitude. So if you see it in there, it makes sense to use it. But we don't require it. The next two field wells that I want to talk about are size and color. Size makes probably a lot of sense. I probably don't have to explain a lot about it. If you have points and you drag a field into size, it's going to resize your points based on the values in that field. So those are a couple important pieces to mention. Size only works with points, and size only works with numerical data. So numerical and points work with size. We've also got the color field well, and that can also help you understand or see patterns in your data using color instead of using size. And so color is a little bit more robust. You can use it with location areas as well as points. And it also works with categorical data, such as strings, as well as numerical data. So a few more options for your color field well if you want to show your data differently on the map. The next field well down is the time field well. So if you have date-time information in your data, you can bring your date-time field into the time field well, and we will create essentially a little playback bar, and we'll apportion your locations through time on that playback bar and allow you to play through your data, scrub forward, scrub backwards, and try to look for temporal patterns in your data. And the other main field well that you'll want to know about when working with Maps for Power BI is the tooltips field well. And so you're probably familiar with this, probably already know what it is, but if there's additional data that you want in your hover tips, you would want to drag that additional information into your tooltips field well. So instead of just talking about it, let me show you what this looks like. Okay. So this is a pre-configured report. I've already got some stuff on there. It's not important what it is. It's just generic demo customer data showing some KPI information, a line chart, a bar chart, and now an ArcGIS maps visual. So I'm going to resize that And as I mentioned, the first thing that you're going to want to do is add a location to this. So I'm going to drag in my single field address into location. And what it's doing is what I told you a minute ago. It's sending those address pieces back to ESRI. We're geocoding it. We're sending back latitude and longitude. And then we're displaying those points on the map. You don't have to know all of that background stuff, but I figured since you're here, you might be interested. So now I've got points on a map, and I can pan that map. I can zoom into that map. It's fully interactive. And as I hover over points, I'm going to start to see some information about those points. So pretty easy so far. Just dragged a field into the location field well, and there we go. Next one that I want to work with is size. So maybe I want to visualize some information about sales data for each of these customer locations. That's as easy as dragging the sales field into the size field well, and I can start to see my points showing some more information. I can start to see customers that have very little sales here with small circles. I can start to see customers with large sales with bigger circles. So it makes it really easy to just glance at the map and quickly understand where my big accounts are and where my little accounts are. So I can also use color to represent this same information. So I'm just going to drag that sales field down into color. And again, it shows me low values in very light shades, kind of blends back into the map. And it shows me high values in dark shades that kind of pop out a little bit. So this is helping you kind of understand where those things are without having to know the data intimately. So I'm going to move sales back into size. And what I'm going to do next is where things start to get a little bit interesting. You can actually use size and color together to show two different variables. So with sales determining size, I can pull in the transaction type into color. And so now I'm showing a couple different things on the map. I'm showing the location of the points. I'm showing the size of the points based on the sales value. And I'm showing it being either red or blue based on whether it was an online transaction or an in-store transaction. So this is starting to get pretty powerful. This is starting to show a lot of information just scanning the map. But let's keep going. I also have the purchase date for when each of these sales happened. And so I can bring that down into the time field. And so as you can see, it split my purchases or my transactions across these time intervals. And I can now scrub forward and start to look at patterns in my data through time. Scrub backwards. I can grab the handles on this bar and actually encompass several of these time periods at once. And scroll that forwards and backwards, or I can just hit play and let it cycle through and observe the patterns that come out underneath. So the final thing that I want to show is the tooltips field well. And so if I hover over this, there's a lot of information in there, but I might also want to see the account ID in case I want to follow up and look it up in one of my other CMS systems. So now, when I've dragged in the account ID into the tooltips field well, I've got account ID in my hover tip. So a lot more information to go. So those are the basics. That's the simple stuff for ArcGIS maps for Power BI. One thing that I also want to mention as a basic for the map visual are the selection tools. That's a really important critical piece. You can start to do selections on this map, not just one at a time, which is the mode that I'm in right now. I can click on one point and it will interact with the other visuals on the report. But the really powerful thing is being able to switch into a multiple select mode and select multiple points on the map and have that update my report visuals. So this is a really powerful thing. You're starting to get into some pretty basic spatial analysis, but it is spatial analysis at that point. You can say, I've identified an area that I'm interested in. You can make the selection of points in those areas and then see how it plays out in the other visuals that you have on the report. So moving beyond the basics, we're going to go into edit mode. And so this is a critical piece that you need to know about. If you don't know about this, you're going to miss a ton of ArcGIS maps for Power BI. But you need to know that in the three-dot menu up here in the top right, there is edit mode. It's easy to miss, but I don't want any of you to miss it going forward, so that's why I'm going slow, taking my time, making sure this sinks in. When you go into edit mode, you get more tools, and you can do more things. And so some of these tools and things are what I'm going to focus on next as I jump back into the presentation. So we covered the basics. Now I want to talk about some of the additional tools that you can use to really make this map yours and to really customize it. So the first way to do that is the tool on the far left of the toolbar up there, and that is the base map tool. And so base maps can be used to really make your data pop. You can really shine when you use base maps. We have a really striking dark gray canvas that comes out of the box. And so if you use some really bright, bold colors, your data really jumps off the screen. It's really nice. Turn down the transparency, turn up the bright, bold colors, and you've really got a striking map. Our default map that we create, or the default base map that we use, is the light gray canvas, and that one is really meant to just fade into the background and kind of let your data shine. It will provide some reference, it will let you know where places are, just to get your bearings, but it's really meant for your data to really be the star of the show. The next one down is OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap's a pretty cool idea. How many people are familiar with OpenStreetMap? Not as many, okay. So what OpenStreetMap is, it's almost like Wikipedia, but for maps. So you can create an account, go in today, and start editing places in your neighborhood. And so it's basically the Wikipedia of maps. And so there is a ton of detail in OpenStreetMaps, and sometimes that can be useful. Frankly, it's a very busy map. So if you use it as a base map, be aware that there's a lot going on, so you're more likely going to be using it for a reference map than for a slate for your data to be on top of, but it's there and it has its uses and it has a ton of information in it. Finally, at the bottom, we've got the ArcGIS ESRI Streets base map. And so this is a really great one if you're wanting to show anything about transportation or road networks or anything along those lines. It's really focused to highlight where roads are and where transportation options are. So those are the included options out of the box, and it's pretty simple stuff. You can pick a base map, figure out the one that works with your data, and go. So the next tool over, beside base maps, is location types. And that's what I was referring to earlier, where I said you can drag things into that location field well. We'll do our best to figure out what it is. If we don't figure out what it is and nothing shows up on the map, you can come into edit mode, go into location type, and then tell us whether you want your locations as points or boundaries. You tell us if it's in many countries or one country. And if you pick one country, tell us which country that is. And we have a huge list of countries here, and with all of those countries that we support, we also have their unique standard geographic boundaries, and those are all different based on the countries. Not everybody has the same ones. So once you pick the country, you'll go in and pick the geographic boundary type that you're trying to map, and we'll take it from there. So it's pretty handy to be able to really refine and get your data on the map just the way you want it. So some things to note about our location geocoding. We automatically geocode street addresses. We have a very high precision, high accuracy global geocoder, so we'll be able to handle address information from around the globe. As I mentioned earlier, we support address hints, and that's what I was talking about when you can go into your data modeler and pick a category and actually tell us where the location is. One thing about geocoding addresses in the location field well is that it's capped at 1,500 addresses per map, so that's something to take note of. If you need more than that, use latitude, longitude. We also support standard geographic locations from around the world, as I mentioned, and we can also put boundaries on the map. So that's pretty powerful stuff. So actually, I'll get into that now, and I'll show you exactly how that works. This is going to be a quick demo, but I always like to show more than I like to tell. So what I'm going to do is get this into edit mode. I'm going to add a map onto the report. And what I have over here is data from Brazil. I have just some basic demographic and geographic information about Brazil. One thing about Brazil is that they do have states, much like the US. So whenever I drag the state field into the location field well, things get confusing for our geocoder. We say we know it's a state, we don't exactly know where the state is. And as you can see at the bottom, it says, failed to locate 27 features. If you run into this problem and you're trying to geocode in some place other than the US, you may need to go into edit mode and go into the location type tool. We do want boundaries, but if I wanted to, I could switch to points. I want boundaries, they're in one country, but they're not in the United States. They're actually in Brazil. So I can pick Brazil. And I don't have country boundaries in this data set. I actually have state boundaries. And so this location type field is what I was talking about just a second ago, where we have unique geographic boundaries for all of the countries that we support. So this list is going to be different based on what country I pick. For example, if I pick Belgium, the country or the location type list is going to be different than it is for Brazil. That's not what I want. So Brazil, states, go. And we've got our Brazilian states on the map. So that's how we get location information on the map if it's not picking it up automatically in the location field well.
Hey, Scott. So I think in the keynote yesterday, Alberto said something about how you can represent data for an election truthfully on a map, right? Something about showing it on boundaries may distort the data.
Yep, thanks, Wukash. I'm glad you brought that up. We definitely did not plan this ahead of time. That was a completely off-the-cuff question. Yes. So that's exactly right. I have some election data from 2016, and as he mentioned, the standard election map that you see in the US, and I'm sure other places around the world, they'll have these geographic boundaries, and they'll be shaded in the color of the person who won that geographic boundary. But what it doesn't catch is the actual population of the people in those places. This is misrepresenting that. It looks like it's a sea of red, like everybody in the world did this thing. And that's not the case. And so what we can do is we can use this location type tool to go and fix that. And so if you're making visualizations using ArcGIS maps for Power BI, you can go into the location type tool and switch those from boundaries to points, tell it OK. And so then you've got points representing the places, and what you can do to make it more accurate, based on Mr. Cairo's presentation yesterday, is to size those based on population. So let me open this back up. Let me bring in population into the size field well. And so this is going to paint a little different picture about where the population actually lies and who actually voted for these people. So you can see the red areas are for election 2016 in the US were Trump voters. The blue areas with higher populations were Clinton voters. So this tells a little bit more accurate of a story about how many people actually live in those places. It's not this overwhelming wall of red.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So let's get back into our presentation and move forward and talk about some more things in Maps for Power BI. So 2 more tools that I want to talk about. I want to bundle them together because they are really working together within Maps for Power BI, are the Map Themes tool and the Symbol Styles tool. So Map Themes allow you to have the broad strokes and pick broadly how you want your data to be represented on the map. For points, you can pick points as a map theme, just simple points. You can pick size-based renderers. You can pick color-based renderers. Or you can do a thing called aggregation. And so if you have a ton of points, sometimes it doesn't make sense to just look at points on a map. Sometimes you want to aggregate them together so you can start to see the trends based on the aggregation and not just on the points themselves. And so 2 of the themes that we have that can help you with that are clustering. And so that's the one on the top left, the red circles, points clustered together based on the scale and zoom level you're at. And the heat map, which is on the right, which seems like almost everybody that is not a GIS professional probably is familiar with heat map if they're not familiar with anything else about GIS. And so that's really a density map. And so it's actually aggregating points together and showing you where your points are the densest. And so those map themes are the broad level that you can pick from. And then to really refine the details and really hone in on how to make the map uniquely yours and work for you, you can go into symbol styles. And so symbol styles, again, lets you get down and adjust size, color, transparency, the binning algorithm, and more. It really lets you get in there, like I said, and make the map yours. So I'm going to do another demo. This is really just showing you what map themes are and how you can use symbol style to identify and iterate on analytics to make decisions. So let me go over here. I've got a data set from College Scorecard, and what I'm going to be trying to do is help my cousin, she's in high school, help her figure out which college she might want to go to. And so there's a lot of information in this data set. Things like, for each of these points, these are schools in the West. She knows that she wants to stay out in the West. And we have a lot of information, such as institution name, we have admission rate, we have things like SAT scores, and we have all of these PCIP things. Those will come into play a little bit later. The one I'm going to focus on is PCIP 11. She's very interested in computer science. And so this is showing PCIP 11 will show the percentage of people graduating with computer science degrees at that institution. So let's actually put that on the map. Let's start looking at the map beyond just these points and start looking at it with PCIP in, I think I want that in color. So what you can see is that all of those points are now slightly changed. It's not a particularly good map. It's not a particularly easy to read map. So what I need to do is I need to go into edit mode and really tweak those things. So the first thing I want to show you, because I discussed it, is the map theme. As I mentioned, we've got location only, which will show me just points. We've got the heat map, which I could turn on and see a heat map of where schools are, but that's not really going to help my cousin figure out where she wants to go to school. I can do clustering, which, again, aggregates all the schools together, but that's not going to help her figure it out either. Or I can go back to color. And once I've got color, which is kind of how I want to show this for now, I can go into symbol style, and I get a lot more options on how I want to show this. So what I can do is, by default, we provide a bunch of smart defaults. We've been doing cartography for a long time, and so we apply some of those smarts on these data sets by default. We try to help you out, and so we apply 40% transparency. If you want to make that pop off the map more, you may want to turn transparency down a little bit, and you'll see that happen as I crank that down. You can also change the symbol style. This is basically just personal preference, but if you have a couple map visuals on your report, this may help you differentiate what different things are if you use squares for one map and diamonds for another map, for instance. You can change the symbol size, you can change the outline color, you can turn the transparency of the outline all the way up or all the way down, depending on what you want to see. And really the piece that I wanted to talk about most are these classification types. This is where you can actually enhance some of your analytical capabilities of this map by changing how the colors are actually apportioned on the map. By default, we're going to pick natural breaks as a classification type. And so what that does is that goes into your data. And so we have a histogram here. We have both a color tool and a histogram off to the side to kind of give you a visual indication of what your data look like. And so this is what natural breaks picked as the appropriate breaks for this data set. If I don't like that, I can pick one of the other ones, such as equal interval. And the nice thing about this tool is it visually tells you exactly what each of these classification types do. So this one literally sets an equal interval across your data set and puts points into them. You can switch to quantile, which is pretty useless in this map. It tries to put the same number of points in all the different breaks, and for this particular data set, they're all very low, so it's not useful. I'm not going to use that one to help out my cousin. I can also use standard deviations, and this one's getting a little bit better. This is showing me, again, to remind you what PCIP 11 is. It's the places with really high graduation rates in the CS field. So all of these dark points that I'm seeing are places that graduate a lot of people in CS. And so we're starting to see ITT Technical Institute in Corona. We can see IT Computer Training Academy there in Riverside. I'm not sure that my cousin, nothing wrong with these places, but I don't think my cousin wants to go to these places. So let's do some more things to help out with this. I'm also going to pull in, let's see, average SAT scores into size. Again, I'm using multiple variables to help me understand what's going on. And so a few different schools pop out. The ITT ones aren't being shown anymore. We're starting to see things like Harvey Mudd College, which is just down the road from where I live. I wasn't aware of it, but apparently it's a pretty good school. High SAT average and graduate a lot of CS folks. Same thing with the California Institute of Technology. That's also a place that I might want to recommend to her. And so as I pan and zoom around the map, it's starting to tell me more places that have high SAT averages and also graduate a lot of computer science people, such as Stanford, et cetera. So as you can see, I can really tweak my settings in here to help me understand my data set a little bit more. And so that's really the point of this demo, is to let you know that by tweaking your symbol styles, you can really extract out and draw out the meaningful pieces of your data on the map. So let's jump back into the presentation and move right along. So the next thing I want to talk about are pins and drive times. And so pins and drive times, again, are two tools that work very closely together. Pins allow you to add the places that are important to you onto the map in a persistent way. It's as simple as that. Your Power BI data might be refreshing all the time and coming and going, and things might be lighting up and going away. These pins are places that could represent your store locations or any place that's important to you that you always want to be able to visualize on the map. Search for it in the location box, drop the pin, and then you can do other things with it, like create drive times. And so drive times are something that I'm very excited about. You can select anything on your map. It could be those Power BI data points, but if you create a drive time around a Power BI data point, be aware that if your data updates and it goes away, the drive time will still be there, and you might be wondering why it's still there, because drive times are persistent. They'll stay on your map. But if you use it with one of those important locations of yours, it can start to do some really interesting things. And so at this point, I want Łukasz to show me one of those interesting things that we can do with pins and drive times.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. So I'm going to use Power BI Desktop. So Scott's been using the Power BI service. I'm going to just hop into Power BI Desktop. And I want to show you this example. This example is very much kind of a sales example. So in this scenario, I have a bunch of customers. I have a funnel that I'm managing, different leads, trying to work through, seeing where I'm winning, where I'm losing. And one of the things that pops out to me, as you can see, I've used all those symbol style options that Scott was talking about, and I've categorized all of my leads and customers by whether they're winning. So this particular red one is lost. What you'll notice is there's sort of a group of customers over here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's a sort of a scattering over in the Oakland area. Now maybe what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to open a new office, trying to address that Oakland market. So what I can do is I can come into this edit mode, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using the pins capability. So over here I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm going to search for a place. And when I do that, it's going to suggest Oakland, California. And if you notice, there's a little pin came in here. It just got added right here. If I mouse over it and select it, you'll see that it came in. I can go do some color changes if I'd like, so make it sort of stand off. But one of the things that's interesting to me is I want to see, if I did place an office right in that location, the existing leads that I have, how many of them would be within a 15-minute drive time, or maybe a 1-mile radius of that particular place? So just come on over here to the drive time selector. You'll notice I get a selection toolbar over here. I can select a single point, or I can select multiple points. So I'm just going to do is I'm going to select that particular pin. And I get an option here for selecting a drive time. So I can have a radius. Let's try radius. And let's start with like a 2-mile radius. And you'll notice that immediately I get a 2-mile radius placed around that pin. And so I can go see actually now, if I select the drive time, I actually see all those points that are contained. The great thing about this, though, is that it is fully interactive with the other visuals. So Scott sort of mentioned this selection toolbar over here on the right. If I go into it and I select the thing, I can actually go and select this drive time. And what ends up happening is the rest of the report is sensitive to the data points that are contained inside that drive time, right? So what I can do is I can continue my analysis. I mean, that's great, so that's a 1-mile radius, but I'm really more interested, let's say I'm opening a pizza joint, right? What I want to do is I want to go and figure out who's within a 15-minute drive time. So let's go and go do that. So again, I'm going to select that data point, and this time I'm going to choose a drive time, choose 15 minutes. And now, when it processes, it's going to show me the drive time for 15 minutes around that point. Shorter drive time?
No. How's your network connection?
Oh, my network connection probably just died. Let's try for 5 minutes. Oh yeah, my network connection hopefully is not totally gone. In any case, it would generate the same kind of thing. And I think it's interesting then because I'm able to use that to understand my data and find the places where I can place offices to address my particular customers.
Yep.
And that's sort of taking you one step further along that GIS journey that Scott's been kind of painting.
That's right. We're getting closer and closer to, or getting more and more advanced in our capabilities so far. So I'm going to jump back in and continue our discussion of some of the other things that we can do. One of the things that we can do are look at demographic layers. And so that's another tool along that toolbar. And so it falls under the reference layer tool. And under that reference layer tool, we have two things, demographic layers and we have ArcGIS layers. The demographics are US-based, so that is one thing to keep in mind. But we do include 10 of them out of the box for free, and these paint basically a picture of all these different variables across your landscape. For example, one of the reference layers or the demographic layers is average household income. So you can see across the US different household incomes and how that varies based on geography. We also have diversity index, we have median home value. We have a lot of this additional information that can contextualize your Power BI data and start to see things on the map. And when you can see additional information coming from ESRI and these demographic layers along with your data, that's really a lot of context that we're providing that we think provides a lot of value into Power BI. Another thing in that reference layer toolbox are ArcGIS reference layers. And so as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, ArcGIS is an online system, and we have a lot of partners and customers and users that are using ArcGIS online, and they're publishing data. We have partners that publish official authoritative data, such as the Weather Service and NOAA, and people publishing these layers that you can then bring into Power BI and use it in context with your Power BI data. And so this is a really powerful concept, and it's really literally getting at that concept of merging GIS and BI and allowing you to use the two together. And so I want to show you a demo quickly. We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to show this because this is pretty cool. Let's take a look. Let's go to Florida. And so one of the things that we can do is to set up this demo, this is an insurance scenario based in Florida. And we know that it's about to be hurricane season. So we know that storms are coming. And as an insurance person in Florida, there might be a lot of flooding, a lot of water damage related things, a lot of storm damage related things. And what we might want to do is evaluate risk against that storm season. So on the map, I have my customer locations. The value of the policies are shown in size, the type of the policy, whether it's a home or a car or a commercial insurance policy, are shown by the color of the points. And so I know that the storm's going to hit, but how do I know where it's going to hit? I can learn where it's going to hit by going back into ArcGIS and pulling in a layer. And so I know that it could be my GIS department, I could be using a NOAA service, but I know that there is a layer out there that will tell me where the storm's going to hit called storm surge. And so I know this is what it looks like. I'm going to add that to the map. And if we go back to the report, we can see some new information on the map. We can see some areas where the storm is predicted to hit. If I click on these things, I get information in the hover tip. I can see that this is a 6 to 10 foot storm surge area in yellow. Orange represents 10 to 15 feet storm surge areas. And just like Łukasz was able to use the drive time areas to make selections, you can also use these reference layers to make selections of your Power BI data. So let's go back into that tool that he was showing you, the third one down, and let's click on one of these areas. So you'll see all of the policies in that area were selected. I can see that the value of all of those policies in this green area is about 8.6 million, and I can get a breakdown of what kind of policies I might be seeing being affected by this storm. So again, running out of time, but this is a very critical key capability of bringing GIS and BI together and really emphasizing the power of that.
So Scott, I've got a question. Like, what happens if I'm at FEMA and I'm trying to figure out like how many people could be affected by that flooding? How would I be able to see that on this map?
That is another great question, Łukasz. So I'm going to skip the slide talking about this next thing, and I'm just going to talk about it. There's a new tool called infographics. And so infographics are, again, variables that we're providing into this software where you can turn on information for the area that you're viewing in the map currently. So we have a ton of variables. I'm not going to go over all of them, but one of them is total population. So if we want to see not just which customers are affected, but we want to start looking at how many people are affected by this storm, we can now start using this area to drive the infographics tool. So within this area that I picked, this green area down here, there are about 3 million people that are potentially going to be affected by this. I can click on these other areas, and we can see that in this higher risk area, there are actually a lot fewer people, so that might not be as critical impact to the population. If I click away from these areas, you'll see that it just says current view. So in this whole of South Florida, we're seeing about 11.7 million people in this view. The really cool thing, and the thing that I love to do, I just sit here and like scroll and pan and zoom, is that as I move the map, you can see that update in real time. So I'll always just go back to my hometown, and just double check the population, see what it is. And it's really snappy, really responsive. It's a fun thing to add facts at a glance, just to kind of augment your visual. So with that, I'm going to jump forward a little bit. I would like to wrap things up by letting you know some information about where you can learn more about maps for Power BI. We've launched a GeoNet community on the ESRI site. Please take a picture of this slide. Feel free to go there, share these out. Our GeoNet community is where you can interact with myself and other people on the team to find out more, tell us what you'd like to see in the future. This is a really great resource that we're making available to everybody in the Power BI community. We've also got a great documentation site. One thing ESRI does really well is documentation, and so please go out there if you want to learn more. And also, if you have colleagues or friends that weren't able to make it here today, I've got a shortened version of this that I do. That's a training seminar out at the YouTube link there. So take a picture, share it around, and thank you so much for coming today.
And I'd like to thank, before everyone heads out, I'd like to thank Scott and ESRI. I know Art Haddad's here. He's one of the head folks over at ESRI. I'd like to thank very much you guys for partnering with us on Power BI and bringing all this value. I think what we've seen today is that you can take your data, any data from any source, and then really spatially understand it in very weird and wonderful ways that we probably would not have thought about initially. But we can do that thanks to this ArcGIS environment.
Yeah, it's been a great partnership. Thank you so much for having us and working with us so closely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we can take a few questions. We have a few minutes after this, so we can just answer a few questions if you want to ask, or we can, if people want to head out, we can hang out a little bit afterwards as well.